Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of our candidates preview. In this video, we will be having a look at none other than Richard Rapport. Alright, so let's have a look. So Richard Rapport is from Hungary. He's 26 years old. He has a life rating of 2764 as of June 11, 2022, the day of this recording, and his qualification path to the candidates was that he was the runner-up in the FIDE Grand Prix right behind Hikaru. We will be talking more about that later. It's also his first time participating in the candidates, so it's very difficult to predict how he is going to do. A fun fact about Richard is that he beat Carlsen in their very first encounter in Tadashiel Chess 2017. Alright, so let's have a look at the games of Richard to see what we can expect from him. So the game that I have selected that really sort of shows his style is the game against Dimitri and Draken. This game also pretty much qualified him to the candidates tournament. He finished in the semifinals in the first leg of the Grand Prix. He lost against Hikaru, but he managed to win the second leg. That got him a lot of points, and that pretty much locked in his spot. But let's have a look. So he opened up the game with 1d4, and Draken responded with the Queen's Gambit decline. And this move a6, which is a bit of a sideline, but Draken has played it quite a lot over the last couple of years. And here Richard took and played this move a3. So already he's trying to make the game very original from an very early on. a3, I think it's almost novelty. So Draken played the move h6, and you guys might wonder like, wait, what in the frick is this? Why is he playing a6 and h6? Well, I don't know. But anyway, Richard played bishop to f4, knight f6, and e3. And here Draken played the move c5. You figure like, okay, white is not putting a whole lot of pressure on my center, and I can afford to go c5, knight c6. I mean, what are these moves? a3 and h6 and a6 are kind of useful in these types of positions. And here Richard came up with a very original move, not one that most players would come up with. The move bishop e5. So he makes his threat very clear. He wants to take an f6 and capture his pawn on d5. So because of that, Draken plays bishop e6, defending this pawn once more, and now Richard goes knight ge2. Right, normally you think this knight comes out of f3, so Draken played knight to c6. Now I was doing commentary on this game at the time, and I expected Richard to go g3, bishop g2, a bit more conventional, but he played the move knight to f4. Alright, so here Draken traded on f4, Richard recaptured, and Draken took on d4 and played bishop d6, activating his last piece, g3 by Richard, and then Draken played rook to c8. Now here, I was a little bit surprised that Richard didn't just take on e6 and play bishop h3. White should be a tiny bit better. I mean, we have opposite colored bishops on the board, but this pawn on e6 is a little bit thinner. White can put some pressure there. But Richard played rook to d1. He wants to put full pressure on his pawn on d5. The bishop is also coming to g2. And here Draken played queen to a5. Now, here Richard played rook c1, so now the move rook d1 to c1 looks a little bit odd, and Draken castled. Now here, Richard finally saw himself forced to capture on e6, because bishop to g2 runs into some trouble, starting with rook c4. You know, like it's a very quick rook c8, bishop takes a3 becomes an idea. So he took on e6, like we captured, and now bishop h3, hitting this pawn. So Draken played king f7. Looks a little bit odd, but he wants to keep his rooks free to create counterplay. So Richard castled, rook c4 by Draken, queen e3, and bishop e5. All very solid. He's hitting this knight. So if black was able to capture on c3, he should be doing completely fine, because he ruins the white pawn structure, and white has a ton of weaknesses on this side of the board. So Richard played knight to e2, a good move. Now black cannot really capture his pawn over here. White has a ton of options, for example rook b1, and if the bishop move, you take on b7, and white gets a devastating attack. So Draken played rook fc8. Now Rapport traded, and he played the move b4, hitting the queen. Queen a4 by black, and it looks like black's doing pretty well. Right, black has control over the half with c-file, the queen is pretty active, the bishop is active. Of course, this pawn is a bit of a problem, but it is defended for now. But Richard played knight f4, and Draken took, pawn takes, he brought the queen back, he's getting full control over this file. Queen e3 by Richard, and now knight e4 by Andrekin. So as I was watching this game, I expected this game to end in a draw. And actually Richard played the move f3, and Draken played rook to c3, hitting the queen. The queen went to d4, rook c4, queen e3, rook c3, queen e4, rook c4. And about around this point, Richard only had 2 minutes on the clock. So pretty much everyone else, you would expect them to just go queen e3, take the repetition. This was the second classical game of the match, and then the match would just go to a tiebreak. But Richard took a very courageous decision. He played the move queen to e5. Now you guys might be wrong, like, okay, big deal. I mean, you move your queen over here, what's the difference, right? Well, the thing is, if black moves the knight back, now after rook e1, we get the initiative. This pawn is under attack, and black's only way to defend it would be to go queen b6 check. Our king has to move over, and rook c6 to defend it. And here white definitely has an advantage. But the drawback of the move queen e5 is that it allows this move knight to d2. Now this rook is under attack, and you also have to keep defending the pawn on f3. But if you go rook f2, you run into a lot of trouble because black is the very strong rook c1 check. You go king up and knight c4, hitting the queen, and as soon as this knight lands on e3, it's basically checkmate. So white would have to go here, but then rook d1, very nice move, and white's just in a ton of trouble. Like, it's not possible to keep protecting the e3 square. But Richard has something else in mind. After the move knight to d2, with only like a minute or so on the clock, he unleashed f5. Wait, what is this? Like, aren't you just hanging your own rook? Well, black can take it, but then white's going to take here and unleash an attack on the black king. Now, I thought that the best move here for Draken was to play queen b6. The king has to slide over, and now black takes an f1. The variations get very complicated, but we will see the point later on. If white takes on e6, we slide the king back, and if white goes e7, and everything looks great, right? Like, hey, we are going to get a queen on the next move. Black goes knight takes g3, check. Alright, just take, well, rook c1 check, and all of a sudden, you're getting checkmated. So that's probably what Andrekin should have done. After king g8, white still has ways to maintain a balance. First of all, you can take the knight, and still you have enough compensation with a strong passer. You can also go queen b8 check, and after king h7, bishop f5 check, and after g6, you can take, and somehow this ends in a repetition. Pretty complicated stuff, but it basically comes down to the fact that white gives a check here, and if black tries to hide, you can never take this pawn, because you lose your queen. And if you go king d6, then the queen keeps checking it like this. Anyway, very complicated stuff, but the fact that Richard was willing to go into this with only a minute on the clock was very surprising to me. But anyway, knight takes f1 was played by Draken, and here's where it becomes very difficult for black. Richard took on e6. Now black cannot go back, because we go pawn e7, and if queen b6 check, now we just take over here. And our king is just running out of the checks. There's just nothing for black here. White is just going to promote the pawn and win the game. So instead of that, Draken played the move king e8. Now Richard took an f7. Now the threat at g7. The threat is to go queen f7 check. And then we push this pawn, e8 queen, and black is totally busted. So Draken gave a check on b6. Richard took here. Rook c1 check, king e2. And this is probably already lost for black. But here Draken went for rook e1. He probably was hoping that he had a perpetual check. But white has a very sneaky way of weaseling out of the check. So Richard took the rook, queen e3 check. Now we don't go here, because black gives us a check over here. It keeps checking. And there's just no way to escape, because we cannot go to d4. We lose our queen. And so black just keeps checking us. And the game ends in a draw. And if you go here, then black gives a check over here. And if king e3, queen e3, make sure that the bishop cannot block. And white is just stuck in this perpetual check. So instead of that, white went for king to d1, queen e3 check, king c1, queen e3, king b1, queen d3. Okay, he repeated once to reach the time control, but now king b2, queen e2, and king a1. And white's idea is that sooner or later, he will find a way to block with this queen. So queen c1 check was played, king a2, queen c4 check, and now king b2, and black is in trouble. Because after queen e2, now we go to a1, and black simply cannot keep giving checks in a way that prevents white from blocking over here. For example, black goes queen e1 check, we go king a2, and queen b2 on the next move. And white's up a bishop, a bunch of pawns, and it's just over. So Andrejkin made a funny little gesture at the end of the game. He played queen f1 check. Now if white goes king e2, then he sells queen c4, that's sort of the idea. But of course, queen f1 check. Now is a good time to pause your video, because white has bishop takes f1 and wins the game. So, a very original game by Richard, which really showcases his strengths. But let's have a look at some other games of Richard. For example, this game he played in the Super Bad Chess Classic in Romania. So he opened the game with one knight f3, d5 by MVL, d4 knight f6, c4 and MVL. To pretty much everyone's surprise I can imagine, went for the queen's gambit accepted. As we all know, he's a big Grunfeld expert. So Richard played e3, e6, bishop takes c4, a6, and they got a pretty normal game. e5, e4, although e4 is pretty original in this position, I would argue. Bishop e7, d5, c4, bishop c2. Once again, Richard always wants to get a very original position early on. So knight b7, castles, queen c7, takes, and knight g5, hitting this pawn over here. Knight c5, he sacrificed the pawn, but it felt like black should have been doing completely fine in this endgame, and after castles, perhaps rook 81 should have been played, hitting this bishop first, but Richard took right away. Never mind. Now he took an e6, rook fc8, and the players got into this endgame, which should have been approximately equal, but around here I felt like Richard was making some weird decisions. I felt like if he just wanted to maintain the balance, it was probably best to just trade up a knight for the bishop, make sure black does not have the bishop pair, because h3 allows black to keep the bishops on the board, and now, of course, the position is strategically dangerous for white. So he played pawn g4, rook e8, king f1, rook d7 by Maxime, f4, rook be8, f5, and bishop a5. Black's plan is very simple. He wants to take on c3, and then go bishop d5 in some positions. And here Richard made some very weird decisions. He went rook to e5, knight d7, and I guess his brain just disconnected here for a second. He went knight to d5, and after knight takes c5, he resigned. He was probably banking on knight takes c7, and if rook takes rook d8 check, king f7, and rook f8 checkmate. But the problem is that black can simply capture this rook. So I hope that gives you guys an idea of what kind of player Richard is. Once again, he's very creative, very original, which is sort of his strength, but also his weakness. I do feel that he's struggling a little bit against the very top players with his style. There was also a post I made it to Reddit in which Sam Shankland had an opening file that said report random BS. So he sometimes plays, funny openings, but let's have a quick look at his pairings. So let's have a look. So we see here that Rapport starts off with a black piece against Duda. I would say Duda is very similar to Rapport in terms of style. Then he is playing Firouzja with the white pieces. That game is going to be very exciting for sure. Then he's playing Ding with the black pieces. And then he is playing Hikaru with white. So I feel like he's getting some tough pairings early on. It's difficult to predict exactly how he is going to do, but we're nevertheless going to make an attempt. I predict that Richard Rapport has a 8% chance to win. Let me know in the comments whether you agree or disagree, or let me know what you guys think is the correct percentage. And I look forward to seeing y'all in the next video, in which we will be previewing Nepomniachtchi, the former World Chess Championship challenger. I look forward to seeing y'all in that video.